This past weekend, I think we all now realize the significance of what happened on September 11th. There is no denying that those events changed the course of history and have affected every man, woman, and child on the face of this planet, and they will continue to do so. However, as more and more voices are added to the choir, screaming in protest about the official story, and the numbers are growing, and these are not some long-haired burnout leftovers from the 60s. We are military people. We are broadcasters. We are scientists. We are journalists. We are professors. We are airline pilots. We know what we're talking about. And one of the voices that's been loud and very clear and has been screaming from the rooftops has made the powers that be tremble in their feet, because you can't argue with science. You just can't. And our next speaker has probably made one of the strongest contributions into the issue about what happened at the World Trade Center as far as the collapse of the North and South Tower. His contribution, I think, has been resounding and continues to resound not just around the country but around the world. And I understand that he has new data, new information, and new details that he's going to share with you for the first time this evening. Ladies and gentlemen, a man that probably doesn't need an introduction, Dr. Stephen Jones.
Thank you. It's great to be here, and I appreciate a lot of you have stayed to the very end. So this is the last talk at this wonderful conference. One of the great things about these conferences, as I'm sure you've experienced, is that we get to meet other people and new people and shake hands and talk and answer questions. And that's one of the things I really like about it. Now, I will be talking about 9/11 out in the open tonight. And I respect a great deal this quotation from Patrick Henry. In fact, I respect all of the patriots. We honor these men as patriots now. But back in 1775, 76, 77, these were the rebels. These were those who opposed the British Empire, the British government, in particular King George. They were questioning his tactics and his methods on the American colonies, as you recall. There's some parallels here. I hope you're picking up. And Patrick Henry warned, "We are apt to shut our eyes against a painful truth. But is this the part of wise men engaged in a great and arduous struggle for liberty?" Notice how he connects truth and liberty, and they do connect and go together. "For my part," let's all read this, would you, with me, that white part? "For my part, whatever anguish of spirit it might cost, I am willing to know the whole truth, to know it now." Thank you. And that's what I'm going to approach this evening. The whole truth is big, and we've spent 2 days covering a great deal of it about 9/11. It's impossible, actually, in even 2 days to cover all the facts and information that have come out on this subject, exposing the lies and showing that 9/11 was an inside job. I have become persuaded of that. I'm quoted in Wikipedia as saying, Dr. Jones, how do they phrase it? It has reservations about whether it's really a controlled demolition is really an inside job, something like that. Well, I tried to correct it, but they didn't correct. This is me, saying I don't have any reservations. I did, a couple of years ago, but I have data now, hard physical data and evidence. This was a controlled demolition, and I will show you some of those data. The rest of the data is a lot of it anyway, is in this paper. Now, some of the data I'll be showing you this evening was taken just last week, a Wednesday, and I left to come here Thursday, so it's not even in PowerPoint form. I'm going to have to hold it up, and I warned Ted that I will, towards the end of my talk, be holding up some data in which you in the way back will just have to do what we can. But that's the best I could do. I have it in a folder, okay, right here with me. Okay. Now, the other thing I want to say, though, is that this paper is available online. For a long time, it was on my research website, the university, and I did need to get that off of there for various reasons. But it is now available at the Journal of 911 Studies.com. That's just, oh boy, happy, no, you're not. There we go. There. Thank you. It's down at the, okay, I'll show, it's up at the top left. Here, in fact, I have a pointer. Let's use it. This laser pointer somebody gave me. I appreciate that. Right there. Journal of 911 Studies.com. Now, about this paper, when it first appeared, which came out early November 2005, and it's just interesting how things came together. There was a newspaper reporter, the big newspaper, one of the big newspapers in Utah, had contacted Dr. Keller at UVSC. I was going to give some information, a talk there. We were discussing this. Anyway, he said, why don't you call Dr. Jones? He's got this interesting paper about the World Trade Center. And so the reporter did call me. She did call me and had this big front page article. Professor, says that bombs or explosives, not just hijacked jets, brought down the towers. And that did cause a bit of a stir right there all of a sudden as the paper first appeared. And within days, I had this email, then several emails. I'm quoting from this engineer. He called himself, I don't doubt that he was, claimed to have Homeland Security contacts. And in November of 2005, then he wrote to me, the publication of this article can be stopped, and I have the contacts to make this happen. He warned me, you need to give this very serious consideration. Pulling your paper, don't publish it. See? This is an issue that is more important than any individual career. Now, I read that as a threat to my career. And as many of you know, last September, so that's less than a year later, I was put on administrative leave. So shortly after our panel discussion on this subject from Alex Jones's conference in L.A. How many of you were at the L.A. conference? Okay, not too many, maybe 15%, I'd say. But we were on C-SPAN, and 4 or 5 times that was replayed, that 9/11 panel. And that generated a lot of email. I know there was pressures applied. And to make a long story short, I was, without any hard feelings, I would say, I was offered early retirement. My wife and I discussed it. I accepted that. And, we're carrying on. I'm able to speak, I think, more freely. The paper, by the way, was published in about August of also. So that came out about the same time, this warning not to publish, but it was published in David Ray Griffin and Peter Dale Scott's book. They edited it. 9/11 Intellectuals Speak Out is in the title. And so this was published, and then in September things happened. But my career in that sense has ended. However, I have been offered a teaching position, a position at UVSC, where I gave a major talk on 9/11. So they know what they're getting. So. Thank you. Now, one of my great heroes is William Rodriguez, whom we heard yesterday. Any great? I'm going to cut right to a punchline here, which I put on the right. Of course, he's a hero. As we know, he saved hundreds of lives in the North Tower, getting them out. I would like to hereby nominate William Rodriguez for a Nobel Peace Prize. What do you think? All right. Where's Willie? Okay. Willie and I went up to please help me say this right, the radio station, KFPK? KPFK, thank you, Pacifica Broadcasting, and just had a great interview together. We play off each other, and it was just really fun talking to him in the car and then doing that radio interview. Anyway, as you know, William heard and felt an explosion below him. He was in a sub-basement of the North Tower, and his co-worker, Philippe David, was hurt in that blast dramatically, with the skin hanging off of his arms. And then about 7 seconds later, he heard the collision. He could feel that and hear it. And having worked in the building for some 20 years, he knew that was above him. This report, this testimony of Williams, has been confirmed by a study of seismic pulses. This paper was written by Furlong and Ross, and it is in the same journal. I'm going to be pointing you to the Journal of 911 Studies. And by the way, there will be a quiz at the end, so please pay attention. First question, next question. But I thought that was dramatic, that these engineers then and scientists would look at the seismic data. Gordon Ross is a mechanical engineer. And we're able to correlate that indeed there was a big seismic shock prior to the plane hitting the North Tower. And that's in their, let's go back just a minute. Again, that's in their paper, Furlong and Ross. You'll have to read some of this on your own. I can't go through all these papers in detail. Okay, why were there no air defenses on 9/11? It's a big question, as reported in the AP. The scrambling of fighter aircraft at the first sign of trouble is a routine phenomenon. In the year before 9/11, fighters were scrambled 67 times in the year before 9/11, 2001. And a NORAD spokesman says its fighters routinely intercept aircraft. When planes are intercepted, they typically are handled with a graduated response. They don't just go up and shoot down a plane that is off course. But if it goes off course, it's routine to scramble jets, military jets, and escort. And there's a graduated response to try to get the plane to land, try to find out what's going on, why are they off course. And there's some other comments along these same lines. I should quote from the Russian Air Force Commander-in-Chief. Excuse me. The day after 9/11, he said generally, listen to his tone here. Generally, it is impossible to carry out an act of terror on the scenario which was used in the USA yesterday, 9/11. As soon as something like that happens here, I am reported about that right away, and in a minute, we are all up. So this response just takes minutes, particularly in the Washington, D.C. area. So here we have a summary of the flights that hit buildings on 9/11. I want to focus on the fact that the American Airlines Flight 77 went off course. And you can see this in the map, too. There's a time. This is 8:46. It went off course. That is the assumed time, then, of the takeover of this plane using box cutters and plastic knives. These husky airline pilots just let these guys take over. But anyway, that's part of the official story. Anyway, the Pentagon was not hit until 52 minutes later. Now, it was known to be off course for that length of time. And recall, it just takes minutes to scramble a jet. So there's something very peculiar here. And it needs certainly to be investigated. Now let's look at what was going on in the command center, the bunker beneath the White House, as reported by Secretary Norman Mineta. He was there and watching because Vice President Cheney was there and in charge. This is now Mineta's testimony to the 9/11 Commission, which testimony, oddly enough, does not appear in the 9/11 Commission report. But let's read it. During the time that the airplane was coming to the Pentagon, there was a young man who would come in and say to the Vice President, the plane is 50 miles out, the plane is 30 miles out, and so on. Now let's pause there. 50 miles out, that still gives you over 10 minutes, I'm estimating, to respond. Plenty of time, really. We have Otis Air Force Base nearby, and there's one other, Andrews, I think. So to respond, the Pentagon, Washington, D.C. is the most highly protected airspace in the world, I believe. And so, but it's been 52 minutes. It was off course before it hit, and now he's reporting that even when the plane was 50 miles out, they knew about it in the Emergency Operations Center under the White House. Okay. Now I'm going to go down. I put a note here. April Gallup yesterday told us, thanks very much, Dylan, thank you. She told us, yeah, good idea. She told us that she was in the Pentagon, in the area that later was hit by something, and they were not warned. Now this is upsetting, to say the least. The plane's 50 miles out, there's plenty of time to warn the people. Maybe they don't know exactly where the plane's going, but it's heading towards the Pentagon. They should, right? They should warn the people there, get out. You've got maybe 10 minutes. Just clear out. Okay? They didn't get any warning, according to April, who was there and, of course, who was hurt, and her child also hurt. I see what you mean, Dave. You do get feeling like, When it got down to the plane is 10 miles out, the young man also said to the Vice President, do the orders still stand? The Vice President turned and whipped his neck around and said, of course, the orders still stand. Have you heard anything to the contrary? And within a couple of minutes then, the explosion occurred at the Pentagon. Without any warning to the souls inside. And we lost, I think it's a couple hundred brothers and sisters there. This is highly disturbing, and we can't just sit back and let these things go on without challenging and finding out what is happening to our country. FEMA, it's interesting, had an exercise beginning on September 10th in Manhattan. This was discussed by Tom Kenny to Dan Rather in an interview on the 13th. Is that right? Yeah. So just after, 2 days after 9/11, he said, we're currently one of the first teams that was deployed to support the city of New York in this disaster. We arrived on late Monday night and went right into action Tuesday morning, 9/11. Now that is remarkable. This is efficiency. Now, anticipation. And look what happened with Katrina. It took them, we knew the hurricane was coming towards New Orleans. It took them days and, to get their people, to get their act together. Here, they were there immediately. In fact, they were there the day before. Now that is something. But it's also troubling, right? How did they know to be in Manhattan? Well, let's hear what Rudy Giuliani. Now, if you vote for Rudy after this, I'll be disappointed in you. This is Giuliani to the 9/11 Commission. Of course, this testimony of Giuliani's was not included in the 9/11 Commission report. But let's read what he said. The reason Pier 92 was selected as a command center was because on the next day, September 12th, Pier 92 was going to have a drill. See, they had already organized there on we arrived on the Monday before. But anyway, that's why they're there. It's some drill involving FEMA, federal government, state emergency management office. They were getting ready for a drill for biochemical attack. So they're all ready. So that was going to be the place they were going to have the drill. The equipment was already there. This is remarkable. Now, it is sick, actually. You're right. I appreciate the comment. I don't usually use too salty language, so that was a good turn. This is discussed in a paper in the Journal of 9/11 Studies by Joseph Firmage, one of the great papers, I think. It's kind of a sleeper paper. He talks about, he talks about the orders, Mineta. He talks about the forewarning, the foreknowledge. Did I skip over that? Yeah. U.S. officials were forewarned of impending terrors by over 11 countries. I list them here. Russian President Putin, in an interview on the 15th of September, 4 days after 9/11, I ordered my intelligence to warn President Bush in the strongest terms, of course, before 9/11, that 25 terrorists were getting ready to attack the U.S., including important government buildings like the Pentagon. You see, the Russians are wondering, we warned them in advance. Also, we would have sent fighters up within minutes. What is going on in the United States? I hope we're asking the same question. Jane's Intelligence Digest puts it this way. It is rather strange that the U.S. media seems to be ignoring what may well be the most explosive story since this 11 September attacks. This foreknowledge, this intelligence that was clearly given to our government before 9/11, warning of terrorists getting ready to attack. Okay. Just several months ago, Bob Woodward came out with a book, State of Denial, and raised some eyebrows when he reported the meeting of Tenet, CIA director at the time, and Black, who's one of his colleagues there, trying to get through to Rice, Secretary Condoleezza Rice. She was polite, but they felt the brush off. President Bush had said he didn't want to swat at flies. Now, their report, July 10th of 2001, meeting between Tenet, Black, and Rice, went unmentioned, again, unmentioned in the various reports of investigation into September 11th attacks. Are we seeing a pattern here? Anything that doesn't fit in with the official story that, our leaders knew nothing. They may have bungled there. Let's see, how do I express this story? 19 hijackers were alone responsible. Don't say anything. Anyway, he reports what really happened. Let's come down. I'll skip some of this. Black said, as he warned them, Black felt there were things the commissioners wanted to know about things and things they didn't want to know about. Now, this is not Patrick Henry's style. I want to know the whole truth, and I want to know it now. That should have been, and that's what we need, is somebody that, an investigative body, a grand jury, a citizens commission. There are many options there, but we need someone to ask the tough questions. Black later said, the only thing we didn't do, as they met with Rice, was pull the trigger to the gun we were holding to her head. I mean, this is serious. They're trying to get through to Rice and to President Bush. Kurt Weldon, who was not reelected in the last election, oddly enough, held hearings on Operation Danger, and I saw some of these hearings on C-SPAN. He was probing the foreknowledge of the administration before 9/11, what they knew about the attacks. There's this operation, Able Danger. He says, Mr. Speaker, I rise because information has come to my attention over the past several months that is very disturbing. I have learned that, in fact, one of our federal agencies had, in fact, identified the major New York cell of Mohammed Atta prior to 9/11. Unfortunately, his efforts didn't get too far, and he was not reelected under suspicious circumstances, but I won't go into the history there. The next suspicious circumstance. This again is in Joseph Firmage's paper in the Journal. Trading in so-called put options, now this is out of Bloomberg News, which rise in value when stock prices fall. Let me pause. How many of you know what a put option is? Not everybody. A put is basically a bet that a stock is going to fall, and you make money if it does fall. I won't go into the details how they do that, but that's it. You bet it's going to fall. Surged as much as 285 times the previous average volume in American and United Airlines during the days before September 11th. Curious? Doesn't it make you wonder who's making money off of knowing in advance that these two airlines would be involved in the September 11th attacks? Me too. No similar trading in other airlines occurred on the Chicago Exchange in the days immediately preceding Black Tuesday, September 11th. BBC, 18th September, @1. American authorities are investigating unusually large numbers of shares in the airlines, United and American, and an insurance company, specifically those which insured WTC, and arms manufacturers. They believe these sales were by people who knew about the impending disaster. Now here's another Dylan, and let's see what he says. Dylan Radigan of Bloomberg News. This would be the most extraordinary coincidence in the history of mankind if it was a coincidence. This could very well be insider trading at its worst, most horrific, most evil use you've ever seen in your entire life. It's and I want to know who made money off the death of these people. But we have an answer from the 9/11 Commission. They did study the matter. And let's see what they say. Help us out here. This is in a footnote on page 499 of the Commission report. I think it's a very important issue, but at least it made it this time to the 9/11 Commission report. In a footnote, agreed, but it's there. Okay. Highly publicized allegations of insider trading in advance of 9/11 generally rest on reports of unusual pre-9/11 trading activity in companies whose stock plummeted after the attacks. Put options, huh? Yeah. Some unusual trading did, in fact, occur. Now, that's undeniable fact, folks. That's fact. So they admit it. But each such trade proved to have an innocuous explanation. No conceivable ties to Al-Qaeda. No problem. It looks like billions were made. Von Bulow estimated 15 billion made on these trades. Not just the puts, but also the insurance companies and the arms dealers. 15 billion. But none of that was Al-Qaeda related, so it's okay. What are you worried about? Don't you read? Everything's okay as long. It's like blinders. I mean, anything that's not, what the official story says is fine, Oh, it makes me sick. I better get some water before I throw up. Okay. Conditioning. I would like to talk about conditioning a little bit. And was it Mark Anderson? Help me on that, Mark. Did I get your name right, I hope? Yeah, Mark. Thanks, Mark, of AFP. Talked about this morning, the Pavlov dog situation, where they ring a bell and you salivate. Okay. We were told within a day or two, certainly, of 9/11. In fact, I think the very day, this is probably Al-Qaeda. And then soon, we're sure it's Al-Qaeda. And who else could it be? And they hate freedom, and so on. So I've answered the first question, actually. We were carefully taught. You know that movie, one of my favorites, South Pacific, and the woman sings, you have to be, was it the woman that sang? Or was it the Frenchman? Anyway, you have to be carefully taught to hate to hate the Japanese back in World War II, to hate the Germans, to hate the Italians. And then the Germans were taught to hate the Jews and the communists. And now we're being taught to hate, Al-Qaeda, certainly. And 9/11 attacks were by Al-Qaeda. Now help me on the official story here. The WTC buildings fell due to planes. Planes. It's very simple. The hijacked planes, Al-Qaeda organized it. Only Al-Qaeda, of course, that's the story. Hit these buildings. There were no air defenses that day. Somebody goofed. Nobody got reprimanded, obviously, or fired. But that's the official story, and that's it. By the way, 3 skyscrapers came down at the World Trade Center. Only 2 were hit by planes. So the other is World Trade Center 7. So we're a little weak on our explanation here, but they usually don't talk about that. World Trade Center 7. Okay. Any suggestion of an inside job, like I'm doing right now, is conspiracy theory. Right. You've got the term. And when you have that term, then, that's it. You're nuts. Go away. I don't want to hear any more. Right? Isn't that the Pavlov's dog response? Conspiracy theory. No more. That's it. You're done. Okay. But I'm glad you're here to hear more. Hopefully we can get beyond this conditioning by choosing, as Patrick Henry did, to know the whole truth. And when you see some of these things, it makes you want to learn more, doesn't it? I hope so. Yeah, that's why you're here. Good. Conditioning. We're getting this in the news. I'm sure you've noticed this. The next nation the U.S. will probably attack is Iran. And Syria, thank you. That's a part of the plan. The focus seems to be on Iran right now. And they're... Yep. Okay. Venezuela. Okay. Okay. But Iran is looking like next. Let's not get too ahead of ourselves here. Okay. The U.S. military and the economy are, how would you describe it? Strong. Good. The greatest nation on earth. The richest country in the world, despite the debts. Don't talk about that. Number 1. Yeah, you got it. Okay, good. You're okay. But the facade, don't look behind the curtain. If there's a man behind the curtain, don't look behind the curtain. By the way, I was conditioning you a little bit by having this picture here. What do you see here? A young woman looking away. Okay, you're getting conditioned here. Thank you. Now, when it comes, so hopefully you'll be a little careful. Here's another picture. Can you see a young lady there? Okay, I'm getting conditioned here. When it comes to what they knew, this is a New York Times CBS poll last October. Okay, here we go. When it comes to what they knew prior to September 11th, 2001, about possible terrorist attacks against the United States, do you think members of the Bush administration are telling the truth, are mostly telling the truth but hiding something, or are they mostly lying? Hiding something, 65%, mostly lying, 28%, telling the truth, 16%. So we are making progress, people. I want to encourage you. People are starting to question 9/11. This focuses particularly on the foreknowledge issue, which we've just gone through. So, but that doesn't mean everybody knows, what's the answer or what really happened. It just means they're starting to question then the official story. Median. Okay. Now let's, so what do you see here? Now I've conditioned you, do you see the young woman? There's her nose, her eyelashes. Do you see the young woman, her ear? You see her? There is something else there. There's more to this story than this. You see an old lady. So how many of you can see an old lady here too? I just want to know. But only about 20% maybe. Let's go. Let me give you some more data. And this is what we're trying to do with 9/11. There's more to it than just what we've been conditioned to see. Okay? Now here's the young lady, which I conditioned you to see. Here's the composite picture, and here's the old lady. Can you see her mouth, her eye? mouth, eye, nose. See that? It's a composite picture. There's more to 9/11 than just jets and hijackers, okay? And you have to have more data. That's why we're here, in order to see the complete picture. And hopefully, as you watch the news now, you'll say, wait a minute, am I getting the complete picture, or am I getting conditioned to go against Iran and Syria and so on? So here's another picture. This one's harder, I think. But now with that it's the same thing. There's a young woman looking. Can you see the old woman? Her eyes there, her mouth's there, nose. You see both of them now? Okay. Isn't that neat? Now, how many of you can see both the young and the old one? Okay, great. Everybody. So, pretty much. This is what we need to do with more data and careful looking. And this is what I'm encouraging you to do relative and with respect to 9/11 issues. And, of course, again, I point you to some very fine papers. We're trying to get the best organized. It just comes to mind, David Ray Griffin agreed to have one of his essays in the journal, 911 Studies. Dr. Legge is a PhD in Australia. Here's me. Professor Griscom, I'll show you his photo in a minute, is a fellow of the American Physical Society and has written a paper, a letter, for the Journal of 911 Studies, which challenged, what was that guy? Manuel Garcia had a report suggesting the conspiracy theory was nonsense. Professor Griscom bristled at that report, and he responded with a very nice physics-oriented, evidence-oriented paper. All of these papers in the journal are that way. They're evidence-oriented. We want to base what we do so we can make solid progress using evidence. Okay, now we're going to see the collapse of Building 7. You got to see this. I suspect in this group, has anybody not seen this before? Okay, welcome, all of you. It's a Building 7 collapse on the left. Here's a controlled demolition using explosives on the right. I just do a rough job on this here, but if you wanted to see more of this, 9/11 Mysteries is great, isn't it? It's one of my very favorite DVDs. I put a plug in for Sophia, who is here, and Brad. It's a plug. Their DVD on controlled demolition of the World Trade Center skyscrapers has really just expanded enormously and done a great job. Now, how about the 9/11 Commission report? The 9/11 omission report, we might say. They failed to even mention the collapse of Building 7. Just forgot, FEMA does go through, and the FEMA report basically is a pancaking of floors type of approach, and for Building 7, which was not hit by a jet, at all. It was hit by some debris, but from the reports, we can see that the damage did not sever any columns. So, why did this building just give up? There were some fires, but I don't see a flaming inferno there. I don't know. Call me not... I'm getting a little suspicious now of the official story. So, I'm going to quote our best hypothesis, which is the fire and damage hypothesis. FEMA said, our best hypothesis has only a low probability of occurrence. Low probability. And so what does that make you feel? Does that mean, it's like the official story has a weakness and they admitted it? That's good. What does NIST do? They decoupled the World Trade Center 7 study from their tower study. The WTC report is still not out. It's long overdue. They have refused to discuss or to release World Trade Center photos and videos despite Freedom of Information Act action. And, of course, there is more at Journal of 9/11 Studies and WTC7.net. I mentioned this because when I first saw this, which is now about 2 years ago, this is what captured my curiosity. Before I learned about put options and even thought that, the air defense is lacking, and learned the details about that. And Vice President Cheney saying, yes, of course the orders still stand. And then, bam, those hundreds of people were killed. That really bugs me. Deep breath. Love and peace is what we are seeking. Okay. And that is actually a major goal that keeps me going. Okay. So, World Trade Center 7. I'm going to try to speed up a little bit. It's probably too late. But I've got a lot of other stuff. So here's the World Trade Center 7 viewed from the World Trade Center 1 area after the collapse of the buildings. It was about a football field away from the closest tower. Here we see snapshots of the tower collapsing. It falls in near free fall time, 6.5 plus or minus 0.2 seconds. I got out my stopwatch, and I was timing the collapse of this building, and I did that with students so that we had then the plus or minus from our measurements. Then I calculated, looking at the southwest corner, as it begins its motion, free fall is 6.0 seconds compared with 6.5 seconds. Then I looked at controlled demolitions where we know there were explosives used, and these, again, are at near free fall time. That's because you move the material out of the way, and so the roof then can fall at near free fall speed. You know what I mean? Free fall, just dropping something, nothing in the way. Well, if there's something in the way, it's going to slow you down, right? Okay. That's called conservation of momentum. But we already know who did it, don't we? You see, there was a kink in there, and I think this is out of the FEMA report, this arrow pointing to the kink. We know who did it, all right? This is, so of course, but wait, there's more to the story. It's not so simple as just blaming everything on Muslims and then attacking them in their own countries. So we contrast the political method, where one starts with a conclusion. I added this, Muslims did it. Here's the conclusion. What facts can we find to support it and ignore all others, and by no means put any facts that are contrary in the commission report or any other report? You don't know what but the scientific method doesn't do that. The scientific method collects all the facts that you can. This is how you get away from conditioning, by the way, is by looking at the facts as objectively as you can. And then gather as many as you can, and then draw conclusions from this body of facts. Plus, notice the microscope, you do experiments to try and test your hypotheses then as you go along. Conservation of momentum. Again, I'd love to discuss this. This is a great paper by Dr. Legge in the journal. And isn't this fun? He's got the North Tower here, the upper block, which is about 15 stories where the plane hit. He said, okay, we're just going to drop the upper block with nothing in the way, or with some 400,000 tons of steel and concrete. Now, which one is going to take longer? Is it easy to tell? I mean, even if you haven't studied conservation of momentum, it's pretty straight, cut and dry because of our experience. We've hit something. I have had that unfortunate experience in a car, and by George, I slowed down when I hit something. Okay, you get the picture. The details are in the paper. Now here's Professor Legge. Here's Joseph Firmage, who wrote the fine paper. He contrasts the official conspiracy theory, I think he uses that audacious term, and the lie hop and my hop. Those But if you go to the paper, you'll see what he's talking about there. And then he gives you all these data, including the put options, and he talks about the demolition of the building and so on. Joe Firmage. Professor Griscom, he is fellow of the American Physical Society. We're so glad to have him join us. Dr. Greg Jenkins has a PhD in physics as well. And there are others, of course. There are now about 30 papers, all of them peer-reviewed so far in the journal. Scientists and engineers mostly. Let me just give you an example. This is from Dr. Jenkins' paper. Many of you have seen this photo, which and here's about the same time. So what's happening is the South Tower is collapsing, and the North Tower has a plume of smoke coming over. When viewed, but you see the smoke from the North Tower is drifting towards the south. So when viewed from the south, you see this funnel cloud. Now I'd like to just quickly check. How many of you have seen the funnel cloud picture but have not before seen this side view from the west? Seen one but not the other. Okay, quite a few of you. See, but again, more data. Now what has happened based on this funnel cloud, which actually turns out to be a plume from the North Tower primarily, you see? So what happens is people look at that and they have argued what I call exotic theories, which are okay as long as you have all the data. We don't want to be conditioned to view this as, it has to be a mini nuke, or a beam from space. We want all the data. I don't laugh entirely because we do study these things, and there are papers now written in the journal about these two topics. I actually did measurements looking for radioactivity, which must be present if there is a nuclear bomb, even if it's somehow a pure hydrogen bomb, which we haven't even controlled fusion yet for energy, unfortunately. I've been working on fusion, by the way, for over 20 years, and I'm still plugging away on that when I have time. We are setting up experience. But the point is, I know something about fusion and the copious neutrons that are released when the fusion reaction occurs. And then these neutrons activate things, and here I am going on. You do the homework, you read the paper if you're interested. I will say one thing, though. Last summer, when I was in L.A., that was I'm pretty sure, the question that I got asked the most. What do you think about this idea of mini nuclear bomb it looks kind of like a mushroom cloud, I guess, in the building? And so that's why I did these studies looking for radioactivity, because I was getting bombarded by this question, and I have written a paper in the journal of 911studies.com. And there's other papers about the beam from space idea. And let's see, what's the other? No planes hitting the towers at all. There's a paper a nice paper on that. So now I'm going to pause on that because I do have something later, but I do want to mention we invite responses as part of science to look at the data, write it up, present it. There's 4 papers, I believe, now in the journal on the idea of ray beams knocking down the towers. So it's a legitimate study. I didn't write any of those, but well, my interpretation is quite simply that it is a plume from the North Tower passing to the south. When viewed from the south, it looks like a funnel, but in fact, can you see how this passes towards the south? So if you're looking from over here somewhere, that looks like this. It's a plume. I probably better not take questions because we'll do that after, I hope. Time is the problem. Okay, we really need to get into these equations now as we... no, I'm kidding. But the technical detail is there. And this is math professor Ken Cutler, on the fall of World Trade Center. He is a math professor at Brigham Young University and in the Journal of 9/11 Studies. Now, let me say one thing. They said I could go a little over the time. That's why they put me at the end. So I'm gonna. I've got some good stuff coming, but I will skip some stuff and try to go a little faster. Swiss structural professor. Early on, people would complain, well, why don't you have structural engineer types? Well, here we have 2 professors. They happen to both be emeritus and in Switzerland. Let's read one of them. In my opinion, World Trade Center 7 was with the utmost probability brought down by controlled demolition done by experts, and the other brought down by explosives. Okay? Just earlier, just about 10 days ago, William Rice, also an engineer and a professor, retired. See, when we're retired, we can speak out more freely. That's why I accepted early retirement, frankly. The prevailing theory would have us believe that each of the twin towers inexplicably collapsed upon itself, crushing all 287 massive columns on each floor while maintaining a free fall speed as if the 100,000 or more tons of supporting structural steel framework underneath did not exist. Okay? So this is just so blatant when you think about it. I love that picture, the one block in air and the other block hitting all this stuff. You know, that's what he's talking about.
Hey, Steve?
Yeah.
They're designing cars right now to have the crush though, so it doesn't all the energy is absorbed before it gets in there. It's doing the same thing. This time the block's coming down, but it's the same thing as the car hitting the other car.
Okay. Yeah. And it's when you hit something, it slows you down. Is conservation of momentum, which goes back to Newton's laws. Okay, I'll skip what he said. It's in the Vermont Guardian, published. If you Google on William Rice, Vermont Guardian, you'll get this full article. Let's skip some of this. This is all in 9/11 Mysteries and all the good stuff here. I just want to emphasize, though, these buildings, these towers, were not hollow. I get that from civil engineers. Gosh, I just said, well, have you ever looked at the construction? I mean, here's a distant view, and here's a close-up of this core. Interconnected steel columns, 47 of them, tied together. It doesn't just give up when, there's a fire. Put a bonfire there. I have a wood-burning stove. It looks a lot like that. Put a bonfire. The thing has never melted or collapsed or, Okay, here, let's just look for a minute. This is kind of fun. Okay, easy. Look at the plumes coming off, because this doesn't, I think, repeat. But what you see is these jets, or squibs, we sometimes call them, plumes coming off of the buildings. And I want to show you now, for the North Tower and the South Tower, we see these plumes coming off. Again, 9/11 Mysteries does this. So you just get the... Probably. This would be an engineer looking at it. Look at this plume right here. I have looked at this in some detail. First of all, it's well below the destruction zone. And so the idea that this is associated with collapsing, pancaking floors up here has a very hard time explaining the plume here and evidently here, you see. Well below. What is that? 30 floors below or something. Very different. There's also lateral pressure, and if you look close in this plume, you will see what really look like beams in this plume. Now, if this is just air pressure, how is it going to knock steel beams out of the building, you see? Plus the fact, of course, that these beams are being ejected horizontally, which I'm going to come back to that one, which is the point of this slide. The Deutsches Bank building was approximately 600 feet away from the closest tower. Yes, it was damaged by some debris hitting the building. Now, what force is required to hurl steel beams 600 feet horizontally through the air? Is it collapsing floors? More or less straight down? No. It's explosives could do this. And here's something now to bring it home a little bit. My friend Carl Weiss was really touched by this, and it's because of him that I put this in, really. He said, this needs to be hammered home. These are people losing their lives. This is not just some, exercise in demolition. They left people in there. Nearly 300 more human bone fragments were recovered in the past 4 days from the roof of the Deutsches Bank. Badly damaged, September 11th, yes. The bone fragments were mostly less than a 16th of an inch long. Now, how do you fragment bone? Again, if you look at pancaking, wouldn't that tend to capture people in there, right? But instead, they're hurled horizontally 600 feet and reduced to fragments. Come on, people. These are data. We can't just accept the stupid, term official story. Oh, my goodness. Now, let me pause here. And well, how can they keep it secret? It's so big. It can't be. No, go away. Conspiracy theory. They can't keep something like that secret. Well, actually, they're not keeping it secret. When you look at the data, it's just you've been conditioned to ignore conspiracy theory, right? But let's look what happened in World War II and leading up to it. There was, I want to focus for a minute on Operation Himmler, in which the German Secret Service dressed up German prisoners in Polish uniforms. At that point, I'd be getting nervous, being put... They were injected with lethal injection and killed that way. Then, or shortly after, riddled with bullets, and they were left, now appearing to be Polish soldiers, and dead men can't complain, testify, left as evidence of attacks. I'm quoting from this historyplace.com. To be viewed later by members of the press. And it was very effective. This was just inside the border from Poland, now in Germany. And you have all these Polish soldiers. And the Germans got them, repelled them, But they've attacked us in our country, said Hitler. And so this was the false flag operation in which a staged attack is blamed on another group or country. We should be aware. Historically, this is very common. Our own Spanish-American War was at 1898. Remember the Maine, to hell with Spain, because we were told, we being Americans, that the American ship, the Maine, was sunk by a Spanish mine. And so we attacked Spain, got them out of the Caribbean. That's what people wanted to do. Got them out of there. But it turned out that as they brought the ship up later, a long time later, it was not a mine that sunk the ship after all. Oh, sorry, Spain. It was just, we made a mistake there. But again, a blamed attack. The big lie. Now, Hitler talks about the big lie in his Mein Kampf. He says, people will more readily believe a big lie than a small lie, because they themselves will tell small lies, but they would not imagine that their own government would tell a big lie. It's unthinkable. See? It's in Mein Kampf. Well, okay. But anyway, the big lie principle, I think, is still there. In this case, the lie was that Poland had attacked Germany. They had not. Hitler had his pretext for war, and a pretext which he himself had created, and then Poland was attacked, and that is how World War II began, with a false flag operation. The Holocaust followed, again blamed these things. The Reichstag fire was blamed on the communists. Economic problems were blamed on the Jews, leading to the Holocaust. And yes, I have seen the data. It is real. The question is, how were these operations kept largely secret? Right? It wasn't until the Nuremberg trials after the war that the information came out. Years later. But these operations involved, hundreds, tens certainly for the Himmler, and for the Holocaust, hundreds, I suppose thousands of German soldiers, not all of whom were willing to go along with that, fortunately. But the fact is, historically, secrets have been kept, killings have been done. They even killed their own people in the Himmler operation. Now let's go to another subject. He said I could go on. So. Okay. I'll go on for a while. If the tapes run out, we're out. But anyway, this is important. I haven't got the new data. I'm almost there, though. When there's a fire, for instance, in churches in Alabama last year, there was a search made then for accelerants, high temperature accelerants, in particular thermite, was identified. And the finding of such a high temperature accelerant proves arson and necessitates a criminal trial. The NFPA code, this is the National Fire Protection Association 921 Guide for Fire and Explosion Investigations, states, unusual residues might remain from the initial fuel. Those residues could arise from thermite, magnesium or other pyrotechnic materials. This is a standard for fire investigation. Was there a fire on 9/11 in the buildings that came down? Was there a crime? Then this code applies. I can't see why it would not be looked for then. And in particular, I found a report. In recent years, the use of thermite reactions as incendiary devices has gained popularity with arsonists. There's a characteristic burn pattern, and the chemicals here in thermite leave behind evidence. Rather unique in their composition. Thermite, what is it? Aluminum powder plus a metal oxide, typically iron or copper oxide, producing aluminum oxide plus molten metal, iron, copper, which you use here. So in other words, the oxygen goes from the oxide to the aluminum, and you end up with a very intense reaction region and white smoke drifting away. This is the thermite reaction with white aluminum powder drifting away. This is at the South Tower, just minutes before collapse, a very intense reaction region with white ash drifting away. The explanation for this was not sure. It is mentioned in the NIST report, but they don't have a good explanation. Skip that. So here you see, again, a reaction that I did with friends. Here's the white. Now what is this? The ash drifting away? Good. Aluminum oxide. And the white hot metal, it sometimes looks yellow hot, it turns out to be molten iron. And if you notice, there's sparks. That's important later. There's little sparks that come off too. It's not just only the flow. And then we see the flow from the South Tower, this molten metal, of which the loose change guys. Oh, here we go. I don't have sound hooked up. I'm going to skip this, I think. These guys are putting thermite into a jar. They put it on a car, and a Fiat. They make a point of that, a French car. And it eats through the engine of the car in seconds. And then here's one of the more recent videos, but I've shown you a snapshot, so I think we'll skip that. There are about 6 videos that we have now of this flowing molten metal. There's no question about it, even though there have been some of my colleagues who have challenged this. So in response, we have come up with additional videos to show that, yes, orange material, including, I won't name them. But anyway, orange material flowing out of the South Tower is undeniable.
Play the video. Can you replay that?
Well, no. If you go to my paper, see, it's part of the homework assignment. It's in there, the link. You just click on it, and you'll get it. Journal of 9/11 Studies. Here's hot glowing metal. And wait a minute. Don't you have 9/11 Mysteries? I think so. You've got the flowing metal, sure. This is a recent photo that we found, but it was published back in November of '01, showing the debris sometime, red hot debris, they say, sometime after 9/11. And shortly after, this is an experiment I did showing the glowing iron after the reaction, the thermite reaction. Here's what you see in the rubble at the World Trade Center, which glowing something, you see, in the rubble. We did various experiments. These are described in my paper, and also Wes Lifford, who is here, wrote a paper on the appearance of molten aluminum as it's poured out in daylight conditions. There's a bright window here. You can see it. The light, extremely, here's the window. And as he pours out the molten aluminum, it appears silvery. I mention this because some, and in particular NIST, National Institute of Standards and Technology, suggested that this orange glowing material was aluminum, but when we did the experiment, it's silvery every time. Poured out in daylight conditions, every time. Then we were challenged, how do you get it to go horizontally? I mean, we can see how it would melt through vertically, but can it go horizontally? 1999, this is work by Robert Moore. His paper is in, guess where, the journal. Cutting horizontally. He also found a video clip. So I built one of these to produce a thermite jet. So this is hot molten iron. Now the jets out, you can put it in any orientation you want. And I cut through a piece of steel myself in a fraction of a second. Now here's a demonstration. You have to watch close. It's not going to be long. Boom. Thermite cutting horizontally. I'll show it one more time. And through a metal rod in a fraction of a second. These things are for sale. I should buy one of these. No. And this, thanks to Gordon Ross recently. Can you see this? He shows these. This is on the, I can't remember which tower now, but on the corner. Gordon is a mechanical engineer, UK. His point is you have to knock out the corners of the tower, and in the core, you have to knock out the outside of the core. He thinks that's enough to bring the buildings down, the towers. I'm talking about the corrosion that's observed and the extreme corrosion in cars. Notice, I looked closely at this, the mottling, the corrosion in the paint, whereas the plastic is hardly damaged at all, but right next to it the metal is corroded. This on the right is at the World Trade Center, corrosion in the cars. I've been talking about this for months. This is an experiment I did with thermate, you see, and this was in a fraction of a second, cutting through this steel cup and leaving behind this corroded steel. The thermate, it cuts through steel very rapidly, and that's our experiments. This is from the video of the thermite put on a car, and you see what it does to the paint. It blisters it and corrodes it. This didn't even have sulfur in it, I'm sure, but this did. Adding sulfur makes the thermite cut more quickly through steel. Other corrosion patterns I've noticed recently, these are from objects found from the World Trade Center. The corrosion is very interesting. If we could get our hands on one of these artifacts, we could test for the residue of thermate, which I'm getting there. Worcester Polytechnic Institute talks about sulfidation. This is discussed in my paper, New York Times, perhaps the deepest mystery uncovered in the investigation. Severe high-temperature corrosion attack on the steel, both at World Trade Center 7 and the towers, including oxidation and sulfidation, with subsequent intergranular melting. So where did this sulfur come from and the high temperatures needed to attack steel? Let me think. Here's looking at from their paper, which was in Appendix C of FEMA report. The FEMA report, to their credit, they put this in an appendix. Guess what NIST did in their report? They neglected to mention the sulfidation here. It's towers. But maybe it'll be in the World Trade Center 7 report if it ever comes up. Don't count on it. Anyway, we're looking at this sulfur. Notice the peak. So you have these peaks using EDS. It's a state-of-the-art method. You see Fe is iron, S is sulfur. You look in a different region, you don't see much sulfur anyway. But in certain regions, this is the way it is. You get regions where the sulfur would concentrate. Again, this is that cup. I already talked about that. Skip that. So, NIST was asked, was the steel tested for explosives or thermite residues? What does the NFPA 921 code require? Testing for residues of thermite. Thermite is specifically mentioned. NIST responds, NIST did not test for the residue of these compounds in the steel. This, I believe, may be actionable. Certainly it's unconscionable for scientists to ignore the requirement to look for thermite. Deep breath. We did look for thermite residues. This is one of our devices, electron microprobe. And there's more. I have a new website, profjones.com, which I'll try to keep some of the information there. However, what I'm going to show you in a minute will have to be published in a scientific journal before it goes out. Otherwise, the World Trade Center samples were obtained. It's in my paper. You can read it. The chain of custody is well established. The names of the people I didn't mention in L.A., but I now have permission. Jeanette McKinley sent the dust sample. This is important. As the South Tower collapsed, the debris and pressure broke the windows of her apartment across the street. Dust just overwhelmed her apartment. She had to cover her head with a wet towel to get out of there. She came back and saved some of that dust. Bless her heart. You know. Yeah, she deserves that too. She's a 9/11 activist now. And then I went to her apartment in California. She had saved some of the dust for reasons of an artistic display. And I went there with some other scientists. We looked at the dust. I took some of the sample, left the rest with her. And you'll see the results. In fact, that's what I'm going to emphasize now. The dust. Here's what we found. And I noticed this just in January. I'm sorry I didn't think of it sooner. Remember the thermite reaction had sparks as well as flow, little particles going off. So I looked in the dust from Jeanette McKinley's sample, and I found metallic particles. This is spherical. The scale here is 1 millimeter. It's just over 1 millimeter in diameter. I was quite surprised. He says, "Is it iron?" I'll show you what's in there. What do you expect? If it's from thermite, iron, aluminum, sulfur. You guys are good students. Excellent. Those are the three main things. And there might be some copper, manganese. Very good. Ooh, potassium permanganate. You might have an oxidizer in there, copper oxide, iron oxide. So you see these things. Ooh, you guys are sharp studies. Here's some more of the particles. I call this the carrot. It's nearly 3 millimeters long. It's what caught my eye. I was doing some other studies on the dust, and I just happened to notice this. And here's another spherical particle. And here's from the thermite. It's kind of a close-up. But the thermite, these sparks that fly off, they are also quite spherical. And we got a lot of those spheres. So the sphere is one thing. But that's not enough. I'm going to skip this slide. I'm just going to focus on the dust. Okay, let's go right to the punchline. So here are the dust particles. Now we're going to look at this using state-of-the-art methods. EDS. EDAX is the company. Remember, you guys are ahead of me on that. Sulfur and iron, maybe some other things, depending on what they used. Read the papers. Your homework is... Oh, yes, wait. I've got to show you the data. Your homework assignment is to read this banned paper. Now, here's what I'm going to try to do. Thanks. Is show you these data. Now, back there you can't, so I'm just going to have to point this out. This is what you call a control sample. This is steel from the World Trade Center. And you see a peak of iron. It's mostly iron. There's a small manganese peak, because there's manganese in of course, Mark, you may take pictures, but I appreciate if you would not publish these until I get a chance to publish this in a scientific journal. Thank you. As for you, right? Not for the world. Although this discussion, I think, this is where the sulfur peak should be. There is no noticeable sulfur. The technique is quite sensitive, but the amount of sulfur in steel is very low, less than about 0.05%. The reason is because sulfur weakens steel. You don't want to have sulfur in structural steel. And then it's mostly iron and a little bit of manganese. Now, here's the thermate control. This is a ball from the thermate experiment that I did. And we see it's quite different. You see iron, yes, a larger manganese peak. There's potassium because I put potassium permanganate in the mix to be an oxidizer. Sulfur, look at that, a little peak. Now I put about 4% sulfur into the thermate. That's what makes it. Thermite adds sulfur. It's now thermate. Sulfur, and this will now cut through that steel cup very quickly in a fraction of a second. I had a female student who was trying to time that, and she said, "There's no way. I mean, it's cut through." Okay, aluminum. You guys are right on, right? Aluminum, sulfur, manganese, and iron. Those are the main compounds. Now here it comes. Ta-da! This is the dust particle from the World Trade Center, from Jeanette McKinley's sample. And we see, I showed nothing up my sleeve. Nothing. Magician. Nothing up my sleeve, Willie. There is nothing. No, this is science. Anyway, I showed this to Doug Rocky last night at dinner. I just gave him the plots, and he was comparing these, and he got teary-eyed looking at this. Yeah, I'll let you describe some of the implications, Doug, if you would, because I think... But anyway, look, iron, this is the sulfur peak, folks. It's off scale, or nearly, because they scale it, but it goes almost off. Aluminum, we see copper as well. So we can tell you what they put in the thermate. These data, hot off the press, last Wednesday, okay? Iron oxide, aluminum powder, copper oxide, and if you look, here's another plot. Another spot shows potassium permanganate. I can tell you what they put in there. Now let's let Doug comment, if you would, Doug.
When we saw the data, now I knew about this already, but when I saw the data last night, it was very readily obvious. Willie, where are you at?
Right here.
Come here, Willie, please. Come here. Okay. Are we on the main mic? All right. Okay. Willie, you and my friends in the emergency services unit, as you were in the floors, what did you hear, sir?
I heard explosions, and I had this horrible smell that got stuck on my throat.
What was the smell?
I want to repeat. What did you smell?
It was like ammonium and sulfur that stuck on my throat, and I did made a comment on television 5 days after because they asked me. That was September 15 or 16 on television, national television in Spanish, and I'm talking about this acrid smoke.
Where's David? David, in 911 in plain sight, you specifically talked to and have on camera members of the New York Police and Fire Department, and what specifically did they say?
Okay, I don't want to misspeak. Some of the footage that is in plain sight came from television networks, and as far as the firefighters are concerned, there were lots of folks that said that they felt that they were choking. Although I don't have the description like Willie has, an acrid smell, sulfur, et cetera, but the overwhelming majority of the people that we review the videotape, some of it went into the project, some of it didn't, basically saying the same thing, that they were choking and they couldn't, they get into the lungs and then they can't breathe.
There is a video out there where they have the police and the fire, and the guys are saying it was explosions going off floor by floor, bang, 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 bang. The implications are incredible. We have a building in free fall. We have a building with a massive steel structure, both externally and internally. If you look at an automobile today, you will know, and it's bragged about, that automobiles are designed and built such that they have a crush zone, which means that you have deformation due to conservation of momentum that absorbs the energy through conservation of energy to allow the energy to be absorbed before it gets to the passenger compartment. Most specifically, we see this in NASCAR. In order for this building to fall like this, you would think, in a common sense thing, as the building started to fall, unless I'm missing something in all my years of physics, you would have stuff bent all over the place. You would not have the stuff just coming down in a rubble pile. Which suggests, based on Willie's direct observations and hearing, the direct observations of the police and fire, the radio transmissions, our radio transmissions with the explosions going off. Is that correct, Willie?
Correct.
That is, and everybody here, that is correct. The implications are overwhelming. Specialized explosives were placed within the World Trade Center to allow this building to come down. It's not box cutters. Now,
can I ask a question? I want to ask a question. I remember I was a janitor. I'm a layman. I don't understand this, but I want to ask Professor Jones and Dr. Rocky.
By the way, we are both professors.
My question is, does this data validates my story about the explosions that I experienced in the building.
Yes. Well, yeah. Yeah. Look, William, certainly these data validate that there were pre-planted explosives, and we can identify the components now. At least, by the way, super thermite is a explosive form of thermite. You also saw the thermite jet. But anyway, so yes, and of course the sulfur is just characteristic. Another lab, WPI, discusses, didn't explain, but they said, look, we observe high temperature corrosion and sulfidation. They asked the question, where did the sulfur come from? Now we have an answer. And then, of course, the seismic data confirms that there was a shock before the plane hit the tower. All of these corroborate your testimony. And I still want to see you get that Nobel Peace Prize. Yeah.
In my research for the Department of the Army, the Department of Defense, I have used thermite explosives. They are very specialized explosives that can be attached to structures and set off by remote control. That is specifically what I did do. Well, I didn't do it. I had the experts of the experts do it, and they will remain anonymous. And so the question, ladies and gentlemen, that you're left with, based on the evidence, based on the observations, based on the knowledge, based on the data, what do you think happened? But more important, why have the leaders of our nation refused repeatedly to answer all of these questions with all the available data?
Okay. Time's up. So let me conclude then. I went through a bunch of slides, you see. I would like to mention one last thing. People keep asking me, what can they do? And there's some good ideas out there. No shopping for a whole week. Hit them economically. April 15th, go to We Are Not Buying It. Peter Phillips. We Are Not Buying It. Peer-reviewed articles. It talks about cold fusion, my work there. 9/11 Truth and Justice Squads. These go way back. I have a video clip. I'd love to show it, but if you Google on John Gross, an inspector, a person on the NIST committee, being asked a question by these young college students about the molten metal, and his answer is fascinating. So Google on that if you would. Return to the United States Constitution, one of my big hopes. Repeal the Bush Doctrine, which is war of aggression. Thank you. Legal challenges, certainly. FEMA, Cheney, impeachments on the table. Now here we get to the last. Building local infrastructure. Shopping at local stores rather than buying at globalized stores. I think this is quite important. A voluntary simplicity in our lives so that we're not under the thumb of these guys. And this is the last thing. I think it's important while we are working for positive change that we prepare for difficulties, which will probably lie ahead. To get people to wake up historically takes a famine or at least some kind of recession. I anticipate that, and therefore I'm storing food. You're welcome to share, but I don't have all that much. And water, warm clothing, solar energy. The solar cooker that I invented and developed is in the upper right-hand corner. If you go to profjones.com, you can learn more about the solar cooker, assuming my webmaster student has put it up there already. I hope so, with the links. And that's, if we keep working on these values, folks, fitness, victory gardens, we can get independent of the system, and we can succeed together. Thank you. Thanks, Lord.
Wow. Oh my. Man, doesn't that feel good? All right, folks. Before we call it a night,
Thank you.
I'd just like to draw to your attention that I'm sure This doesn't need much of an explanation, but over this past 48 hours, we've had the opportunity to hear from some of the most important people speaking on some of the most important issues in our country today. Some of these people are very widely heralded as heroes, and well, they are. Some of them may not have the high profile as some others, but nonetheless, they too are heroes. These are the folks that are hoping to awaken the sleeping mass of this country. And I just want to leave you with this thought. The seeds of liberty and freedom were sown by our founding fathers, but they did so in the hopes that we would all tend the garden. And what has happened over the past several generations is that this garden has fallen into disrepair because no one has tended the garden. The weeds have taken over, and we can no longer reap the fruits of their labor in the form of our freedoms and liberties. Now, they're all but gone at this point, folks, and the only way that we will get them back is to understand that it's going to take some back-breaking, ball-busting work. We're going to have to break a sweat, get our fingernails dirty, we're going to have sore muscles, and we'll get blisters. But folks, the work has got to be done. And it's going to take each and every single one of us. Don't look to the right and look to the left thinking somebody else is going to do it. Every single one of us has to do it. And so with that, I want to thank you all for coming, and I want to charge you up before you go. So I want everybody to stand up. I want everybody to stretch your legs and take a deep breath and scream from the top of your lungs and the bottoms of your souls, "We will not stop!" God bless you all, and God bless America. Thank you all for coming, and I hope to see you all next year. Oh, Webster's got a couple of extra words.
All right.
Well, for those who wanted more,
Yeah.
you have more. Did you want more?
Yeah, a lot of folks are leaving for dinner.
Well, then they should.
Whoever wants to go to dinner.
What's the arrangement?
Go.